you'll always meet the same person in your life at least twice. So be very careful how you deal with them the first time, because you have no idea what circumstances you'll meet them under the second time. But you will meet them at least twice.
That's where I think the gratitude part comes from for an entrepreneur. Like, I am immensely grateful all the time. This is where you'll see this. The entrepreneurs are usually, they don't worry that much. I'm not talking that you don't worry about business. I'm saying in general in life, you believe. And you believe if it is supposed to happen, it will happen. And you're full of gratitude.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our Second Innings podcast series. My name is Atul Nath, and with me is my co-host for this podcast, Suman Ghose. Purpose, passion, joy are rapidly becoming far more important to us in our life journeys, especially in our work. Many of us are doing this through rediscovering ourselves by changing tracks in our lives to what we're calling a second innings. This podcast that we have put together is where we explore through conversations with people how some of them have done these transitions from their first innings onto a second innings of some sort. We uncover their stories, their experiences, and most importantly, their learnings. Transitioning to a second series very often requires taking risks, stepping outside of societal norms, and most importantly, our own personal comfort zones. Telling and listening to such stories helps all of us. Today, we have a couple of great guests with us who have two very diametrically opposite stories. And I'm really, really looking forward to listening to both of them and finding out how they went through their experiences. The first person I'd like to introduce is Ella Garg. Ella is a retail strategist and designer with nearly 2 decades of rich experience. Her experience consists of conceptualizing retail formats, designing physical spaces, formulating business models, and managing large-sized operations. She has delivered retail designs in brick and mortar and digital formats. After working in the corporate world for several years, she took a break from her assignments as VP of Retail Strategy and Digitalization at Airtel to focus on her venture in the creative retail and hospitality space, and it's called Yellow Marigold. She's a single parent. That's a life job in itself, I'm sure, Ella. She's a minimalist, and she's really deeply into art and food. The other person we have with us is Rahul Singh. Rahul's career, which is now inching very, very close to 3 decades, can arguably be defined in one word: steady. That is, of course, until COVID upended his world. The need and desire to reinvent also came with opportunities from very unexpected quarters. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all about that, Rahul. And blind support from his family. Rahul is a father to 2, a husband to 1, and part-time motorcycle maverick. Quite happy to be bullied by his kids, to jump out of planes. His career mirrors his approach to life. No risk, no reward. Welcome to Second Innings podcast, Rahul and Ella. Thank you so much for being here, taking out the time to do this. Rahul, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little about yourself, your origin story, your upbringing, your exciting younger years. Tell us more.
Thank you, and it's a delight to be here. And I'm looking forward to sharing this journey because it's been quite exciting. And let's see where it goes next. I think that's always been something to look forward to. What's next, right? As far as my younger years go, Atul, I hate to say this, but a lot of them were with you. And so if I'm traumatized, I'm going to blame it squarely on you. We, of course, went to the same school. I had nothing short of a privileged background, the proverbial silver spoon. I'm not ashamed to say that. I come from a family of legacy. We have position in the city, and I'd like to say in the country. And we've been brought up in an environment by my parents where there were no boundaries. No boundaries in what we wanted to do, in what we wanted to explore, and how we wanted to progress, which actually led to being able to get out there and try all kinds of things. Whether it was you want to be a poet or a scientist or a motorcycle rider or anything else. It was like, go out there, you know the risks. We hope you have the education and the brains to take the right decisions, but we won't stop you. And that allowed for a very sort of exciting and fulfilling and young teenage years. I got an opportunity at the age of 16 to go and trek in the upper Himalayas. I had, again, the opportunity to study at one of the finest institutions in the world for college. I was at Berkeley, where I studied physics. What I call the privilege continued to be educated by Nobel laureates and field medalists and really the best in the world in a extremely diverse background, coming in from, I'd still like to call it protected, but a protected Delhi upbringing, to be thrown into university in the early 90s was again yet another adventure on this life full of excitement. After finishing, I actually spent a year in the United States working before coming back and literally coming back and asking my girlfriend at the time to marry me at the very tender age of 24. I now think about that, and 24 is really young. And we've now been married for almost 30 years. And she was really my first partner at work in life, and has continued to be that. And which is why when I say that I've had this blind family support, it's because I've had it for 30 years. We've kind of gone through this together. And so when we came back and got married without having a clue about what we were going to do, I kind of jumped into what I call a family business environment, right? My father had, among various other things that he was doing, he had a small travel division, and I thought I'd start that as my sort of journey into work. And my very first experience was taking 14 65-year-old women to Dwarka and Somnath. I swear on God, I don't know if I was scarred for life or grounded for life, but that was where it all began. And my second experience was with McKinsey and Company to do a recruitment party for their new recruits. And I remember that one of the activities we did was paper plane throwing competitions. And by the end of it, there was just a bunch of 20-something-year-olds throwing paper planes all over the hall at the Oberoi Hotel. And no one really knowing what we were doing, but it seemed to go well because it kind of set me off on this journey of event management and working with corporates for the next almost 25 years. That's really kind of where, let me say, Choices Entertainment began, which was our first venture. It was in event management. Atul, you were very much in the same space at the time. It was a sunrise industry. There weren't a lot of people doing it. I remember when I told my parents that we were going to start an event management business, they said, "वो तो लड़कियों का काम है, तुम क्या कर रहे हो?" And really, that's how it was perceived. The professionalization of the industry and the growth of the industry really came in the subsequent decade. And so it was very much part of the growth story of the industry, which was very exciting because in its own little way, we were shaping it. We were giving it structure. We were giving it some sort of a formal and acceptable presence in the corporate world. Initially, it was not about weddings, but it was very much about working with the EYs and BBCs and Turners and all of those, which were looking for people to do stuff for them, but didn't necessarily have a lot of options. So whether that was a good thing, being one of the first in the business and being able to take advantage, was exciting. Of course, it was limiting for the clients because they didn't have so much to choose from. But also going into now, 2.5 decades later, when we look at the business and it's like, wow, everyone who has a cell phone is today an event manager. And therefore, those 20 years of being in this space almost got me to the point of thinking about whether or not this is what I want to do. And that is really where subsequently, let me call it, the thought started.
So I'm going to stop you there, Rahul, because that's where the transition really starts, right? So, and we'd love to hear about that. Of course, that's what this is all about. Let me go to Ella really quickly. Ella, if you would like to quickly tell us a little about your upbringing. I know it was not a classic big metro upbringing, but share a lot about that with us, please.
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you for having me here with you guys. I'm glad I'm getting to share the story that I have. I'm born and brought up in Dehradun, so it's typically a small town as it could be. No, you can get smaller towns, but yeah, it's like mountains and broadly the radius is not more than 3-4 kilometers when you look at the city. Uh, Very middle class upbringing, nothing privileged about it. And back then, what we called middle class is today what we call a lower middle class. Three kids, parents, father owning a small business, mother being a housewife. Um, we were being raised to be something. I mean, and typically in middle class, the girls are not raised to be anything. They're raised to be married, right? And that's what my childhood was. It was a very strong community thing. We are a very close knit family. We celebrated every festival together. The focus was mostly on, grooming you to be able to handle a family. I mean, as a girl, I can say that boys were more focused on be able to help parents, and this is typically what my upbringing was while I was growing up in Dehradun. Um I think the first breaking thing that happened with me, I struggled with the social setup. Not that I didn't enjoy it. We had a massively enjoyable childhood. A lot of cousins, a lot of neighbors, a lot of playing around, fooling around is more like it. There's nothing structured about the childhood. But yeah, there was also, it's also quite suppressing in many, many ways, when you look at that setup. So my innate desire was to break free from that. And that's what I did first when I moved to Delhi for my interior designing and for my graduation. And I picked up a job very quickly in life. I mean, I think I was 19 and a half or 20, something like that, when I started working first and joined at I mean, Airtel had just started back then. But it was 2 years old or something in 97, 98. And I joined Airtel and in the call center effectively, more for pocket money than anything else. Few years went by, basically, mostly surviving in Delhi, doing something, not wanting to come back home, getting some pocket money so that you can survive in Delhi. Before it kicked in, that I probably am better than most around me. Not from a boasting sense, but in general realization for the first time in life that, your sense of understanding, your sense of intelligence, your sense of calculation, your sense of understanding what is being told is better than mostly who are around you, the people you're surrounded with. And that's when probably the journey started. I was already few years in Airtel, doing nothing, just lagging. But then as soon as this came, I think the journey started really well. I'm a late bloomer, effectively. When you look at it, quite late. And initially, I've taken my own sweet time to understand how the world works, how people work, have my fair share of failures, setbacks, everything you talk about, and I have it. It's quite interesting bag of experiences. I think the second part of my change really happened with this realization that if I come to it, I actually am capable of doing something. And then that's where I started moving forward, and my corporate journey picked up at that given point of time. So, yeah, that's broadly what my growing story is when you look at it. So
Nice, nice. And when I was thinking about your career, I mean, 20 years is a very long time by any stretch of imagination. And a lot of people talk to me, and I'm going slightly off topic here, but seeing the both of you sitting here and talking about each of your careers, a lot of people talk to me and talk about entrepreneurship as almost a release. It's like you want freedom, become an entrepreneur. And I have always had a slightly differing view on that, because entrepreneurship can be extremely limiting as well, because you can't just walk away. I mean, a job you can quit and leave, right? You can't quit being an entrepreneur, especially if it's a going concern, running business, people, etc., etc. It's very difficult to just walk away from that. So it can be extremely limiting. But anyway, coming back to what you and I know that Rahul's journey has a lot of that in it, and he's going to talk about that. But talking to you for a moment, Ella, that 20 years in Airtel. Obviously you did many different jobs, and we spoke about that in terms of the profiles of what you were doing was very different over the years, and that, I guess, gave you different challenges. Looking back now, do you see any signs in there over the years that you were eventually going to do a second innings where you did something for yourself? Did you, looking back now,
I always knew it. This was bound to happen. For me, Airtel was a breeding, learning ground. Right? Every role I didn't do any typically trendy to start with. Right? I picked up retail. Retail was not the hot thing within Airtel. Retail was not. I don't think Airtel initially even really, it was not even passionate about retail that much, because it was a prepaid centric, postpaid centric, very airtime centric marketing company. So for me, retail was something which used to excite me a lot. And I think today, when I look back, I think it excited me because it had a human connect to it. There's something physical about it. There's something human about it. It's about interaction. It's about community. It's about people, how you make people do things. I left in 18, right? But whatever I accumulated there over a period of time in terms of how to make it work, how to make a small format work, large format work, what happens when people come, what do you do with people, how people respond to you when you want to sell something or when you want to talk to them about something. All that experience that I accumulated in Airtel is what comes in handy today. I feel what I do today is a culmination of all my experiences, like my interior designing, my design days, my upbringing as a middle class child, right? Being a girl child, you understand the softer aspects of what people like, the community, uh, women mostly. What would trigger the emotions. All that has been a very innate part of my growing up, not in an obvious sense, but the silent observations.
Such a great feeling, right? To be able to bring all those things together from your past and being able to see that, being able to join the dots and say that, these are 5, 6, 8 things that have been part of my journey that have now culminated in being who I am today. I mean, it's a great feeling.
I don't know about whether it's a great feeling, but I think it gives you a huge amount of confidence because you understand by the vibe, by the body language, by the expression, the change in color, the shine in the eye of a person who's speaking to you. You just understand the body language better because you've seen it. All you've seen is people, and you know how they change or uh, interact with each other. And the corporate world works in a very very different way. There is lot of times people are projecting, but when you talk real India, real families, real people, neighbors, all that community, people are not projecting.
Ella, I'm hearing you and hearing you talk about how it's every person's dream to move from the corporate world to becoming an entrepreneur, and ultimately it probably is it sits somewhere in everyone's fundamental sort of DNA. And here I am thinking I've got the exact opposite.
Like, wait a minute, who's dreaming and who's having a nightmare over here?
Yeah,
Exactly.
this is what makes this podcast so interesting, because I was hearing you said privileged background. I said, okay, not at all privileged background, large city, small city, entrepreneur, but okay, now it's a contrast that you have right now, Atul, today.
Absolutely. What I'm going to ask you, Rahul, is that, and this frankly just struck me while Ella was talking, that in your second innings, as we're now going to talk about, you've now moved into from being an entrepreneur into having a corporate role. In your college years, did you ever consider a corporate job? Because it'd be interesting to know how kind of, at that age, what were you thinking, or was it always entrepreneurship for you at that stage?
No, I think after college, I worked in the US. So I worked for a startup actually in Silicon Valley. So I
Okay.
worked for people, but again, in a very
Hmm.
entrepreneur-driven environment, right? I mean, it was a small team. I think I was employee number 6 or 7
Hmm.
in something that was kicking off. Um,
Employee
and
number 6 in startup in California does not count as corporate at all.
but by the time I left, it was 250.
Yeah. Sure. I was just being facetious. Carry on.
So it was a very sort of it was a short stint. It was just over a year, but it definitely was in an environment which, let me say, was seeking structure. But
Hmm.
as one of the first few, it was still very it was very much a process of discovery. Um,
Yeah.
I I think the decision to come back may have been an emotional one. I don't think it was a practical decision. It was a decision which was driven by I must do the right thing and come back to possibly the family and family enterprise. When I have that conversation with my son today, we don't even discuss that. We just talk about what does he want to do and how does he want to pursue his life. We don't even think about what the options that may be presented to him are. He has to make his own options. He has to discover his own options. He has to seek his own journey.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah.
it's a generational thing that sort of, let me say, drew me back home. So I think that's all it was. I mean, what came out of it was this very sort of long, entrepreneur driven journey. But it didn't quite start off that way. It didn't start off with the intent. Let me say that.
Sure. Sure. So let's fast forward to your process of making this decision of doing this transition and how it kind of came about from being a hardcore and successful entrepreneur to what you're doing now.
Um, so in order to do that, as part, I just want to give you guys some context. As part of the event management space, which I existed in, I worked in the golf space as well as an event manager, right? So I worked running golf events. I put up tents and I put up PA systems and worked with different organizations to deliver golf events at the Delhi Golf Club and at KGA in Bangalore and all these different places. And that, and I also used to play at the time. I mean, as an amateur, I could dig up a golf course. That was pretty much the extent of what I could do. Um, and but that's really where the interest for golf came in. I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed being around the people I worked with. I enjoyed being around athletes. I liked the people I worked with, and that's where, let me say, I kind of found myself steering my own direction in terms of work too. The fact that it was going to land up into something where I am now was an unknown at the time. I'm talking of 2008, 2010, 2011. But it's funny how things come together, right? And this is where karma has its own thing, whether you manifest things and they happen. My son started playing golf, and he started becoming really, really good. And so for the years 2015 to 2019, I actually traveled extensively with him as a golf parent. And while I was doing my work and while I was managing the business over here, I was also around golf courses and things related to golf in a much larger way. And while I was, doing my own role in golf as an event manager, as a tournament director, as a promoter finally, and being associated with the Asian Tour, which is one of the 3 large federations globally, my own interaction with them grew manifold. And this all you do at the end of the day right through this, and this has been very much something that I believed in, is you put in the perfect effort. So you keep doing what you have to do, you keep putting in the best that you can, and you keep sort of hoping that it takes you in a direction that you want to go. And I demanded that from my team. I demanded that from myself as we kind of went forward. And I do firmly believe that that's what kind of got me here. What finally happened was COVID happened. And let's say COVID was the big game changer in all of this. That's probably the trigger, right? But just again, to give you a little bit of history, 2018, my wife and I were walking in Sundar Nursery, morning walk. We'd taken the dog. We were just kind of walking around and chatting. And I said to her, I really want to work in golf one day. And she said, you're crazy. She said, you already do this. You already work as an event manager. I said, I don't want to work on the event management side. I want to work on the management side. I want to be part of something larger. And she's like, you're bonkers. I don't know what you're talking about. She said, this is one more of your, we'll see what happens. But that's kind of where it happened. And then really, yeah, when COVID happened, obviously our business, Atul, as you know very clearly, came to a screeching standstill. It was the first year was, I think, pretty much just doing Zoom calls and talking to people and trying to figure out what's next. But funnily enough, golf is actually one of the sports that came back to life very, very quickly because it was large open spaces. It was not too much interaction with people. And the interactions that I'd had for the previous 10 years with the Asian Tour, which was my second mantra in life, which is that you'll always meet the same person in your life at least twice. So be very careful how you deal with them the first time, because you have no idea what circumstances you'll meet them under the second time, but you will meet them at least twice. And that's exactly what happened with me. I had been working with the Asian Tour. I'd been dealing with them. I'd been working closely with them. And then when COVID struck and golf restarted, they picked up the phone and they called. And they said, hey, we need someone to go and look at stuff in some of the countries that we're expanding into thanks to a massive injection of funds that the tour has received to globalize. And we don't really have the people. So would you like to help? And that was the beginning. So I found myself in Morocco, in Egypt, in Oman, in Qatar, talking to golf courses, to royalty, to sponsors, to kings. Those were some of the most fun 2 or 3 months because we were really on this journey of discovery in the middle of COVID. And then the new big golf startup in the world came alive, which is called Live Golf. Highly disruptive, taking us, big traditional game, turning it on its head, not unlike the IPL in 2008. And as they did that, they started a product called the International Series with the Asian Tour. And soon after, they reached out and asked if I would head that project. It was very, very difficult to say no. Because it was, as I said, it felt like I'd been manifesting this. And it just all came together. It was a combination of wanting it, of the right time, of being involved with the right people, and just, like I said, it all just fell into place.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And I think the passion was golf, right?
I think so. I think I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it got deeper into it when my son was involved in it. I enjoyed.
And how old was he when you were doing when you were the golf parent?
He was 14.
Okay.
So he was playing junior golf. So it was like 14 to 17 kind of years for him. So yeah, it just felt like the universe was telling you something, you know. And before I feel like I'm rambling a little, but I have to share this with you. Right from when we were children, my mother used to always say something. She said the fairy of opportunity is a fleeting, very quick flying fairy with one hair on her head. And when she flies by, you don't know. But when she does, and if you see her, remember to grab, because she only has one hair and someone will grab it. And so if you don't grab it, someone else will. And like I said, I think this coming together was the fairy of opportunity giving me a chance.
Fascinating. Fascinating how you can look back and look at those what you kind of went through and how it connects itself to where you are today. How long did it take you to decide this? I mean, in the sense that you said the opportunity. Obviously, it was a
30 seconds.
transitioning. Yeah, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
I thought it would be under a minute. That's amazing.
It took 30 seconds to want to pursue it, but it took 3 months for me to tell my family, if that makes sense. I did not even talk to them through. I did not talk to them through the interview process. I did not talk to them through the discovery process at all, because I didn't know if it was going to happen. So I didn't want to create even false hope in my own head, forget anyone else's. And therefore, when it did happen, I remember, again, just chatting with my wife about it, and quite nonchalantly. And she looked at me and she said, "How long has this been going on?" And I said, "A few months." And she said, "How the hell have you managed to keep it quiet?" I said, "Well,
so tell me
you
one
keep
thing,
secrets."
Rahul. In this period of this couple of months, were there some, and you only had you and yourself to talk about this because you hadn't shared it with others. What were the kind of apprehensions you went through or thought process you went through? Because from being the person who in an entrepreneurial situation just decides strategy, direction, vision, all of that, to having to work with people, aligning in organizations, this reverse journey is a hard one, at least in theory. So we'd love to hear more about that.
I don't know if there was apprehension as much as, I know this sounds really strange, but I didn't know if there was job security. As an entrepreneur, you kind of control your own destiny. You decide when you want to work harder. When you decide if you want a project, you decide how much money you're going to make. You decide what the next steps are. What I did not know was how much I would be able to control the direction of what I was getting into. What I pleasantly found out later was that it was, again, extremely entrepreneurial. And therefore I did get to actually take a lot of the decisions, which gave me a lot of liberty and freedom and excitement. But the biggest thing it gave me was scale. Atul, I had the scale that I'm operating at now is, and Ella will realize this and know this. I mean, she's coming from Airtel, which is a giant multi-billion-dollar organization. So scale was something that, she's seen.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that visibility in terms of organizations. I was coming off a small firm that my wife and I had built successfully, albeit, but I'd kind of been thrown into a situation where budgets were things that I'd never seen before, where strategy was being asked for the next 5 years, where long range planning was something I was thrown into on day one, where very, very senior people globally were sitting across a boardroom table from me and saying, "What would you like to do? And how would you like to do it?" So there was an interesting amount of accountability, but not just to myself, but to a lot more people. But it was quite entrepreneurial. I have to confess, it didn't feel like I was limited or thrown into a box where I could not break through the lines.
That is a very interesting story. Rahul, your thing is so fascinating, as Atul rightly put it, because it's like the reverse thing, right? Most people are working and they have a passion which they discover and they want to pursue the passion. Whereas you started off with being entrepreneurial, but had a passion which can't, and the underlying thing is golf. And then you got into the corporate world because it gives you scale. Yeah.
I think it gave me the opportunity to build and to be part of of a larger story. I know that sounds a
Yeah.
little strange, but it gave me an opportunity to create a little bit of legacy. It gave me, so I mean, having said that, look, my legacy are my children. It's as simple as that. There's nothing up, there's nothing down. If anyone today asks me, what's your legacy? My legacy are my children. And therefore, how they go out into the world ultimately is really what is going to be, my story. But in my professional world, there was a number of opportunities this came with that I just didn't have. And that's why I'm saying it was too, I would have been foolhardy to pass up on it. I mean, look, I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know how it was going to end up. It's been an amazing, exciting, very, very fulfilling journey so far.
Excellent. So, Ella, let me come to you. Having worked for 20 years, you took the jump, right? A lot of people are fence sitters. They're still thinking whether to take the jump, but it's not easy. Yeah, exactly. It's not easy. You can do the rational part, which I call the cold state. You can have your excels and all of that, but when you actually take the plunge, it's a very different ball game. A lot of emotions going through you, and corporate life can be very structured. Whereas here, you can go in any direction. So, talk to us a little bit about how was that actual move? How did it feel? What kind of emotions were going through you?
Uh, okay. Mine was a little planned one. I planned it. I planned my move. My daughter was 6 months old. Um, I had separated, so I was also going through a divorce. I also had one of the biggest projects in my hand that I was doing that time, the retail digitization in the brick and mortar stores. And I knew the project of this kind and this quality. After I do this, I would really like to exit Airtel, because this is the time when I've done really the dream project in Airtel, and I want to move out and take a break. I initially started with taking a break. I didn't know what I want to do. I didn't know whether I wanted to start a homestay, I wanted to start a business, I wanted to do something in the food industry, opening up a cafe. I had no clue. So I moved back, and I ended up spending about a year listening to audiobooks, traveling around, whiling off time, maybe joining some classes here and there. I enjoyed myself. I took a very well-deserved break for a year, out of which I also went to US for a month and a half, and then some more time somewhere else. And I did all this. I did spend a lot of time with my daughter. And there was a point in time when I felt that I really, now maybe I'm ready to start something or experiment with something. So in 2018, yeah, talking about emotional part, because there was something that you stressed on, what were the emotions? I think it was when we do something like this, transition is, I always say that it's not a show of strength. It's the requirement you're going through. Maybe you need to. And that's what happened with me. I was at a point where I had done what I had done, and I knew that to move forward in life and to grow as a person, I really need to break away from whatever has happened already. So, be it my corporate career, be it Gurgaon, be it Delhi, whatever I was doing, I just left it all, took a break, came back, bonded with my kid, started something. But I was also, this is what working for many, many years, what happens to you is you become very rational and realist. So for me, when I started my business, I started with a very small setup. I curated some stuff. So Yellow Marigold, to start with, was a tableware brand. It still is a tableware brand, but we have grown larger. than how I started in 2019. I got some stuff. I wanted to test my theory that what I think I like. Do I really like doing that? I mean, I have to test that first because everybody feels that, we like, I would want to do this and do this. Almost I've seen everybody fizzling
Yeah.
up. So for me, the first step was not customers, it was myself that I think I like to do that. Do I really think, would I really like to do that? So after 6 months, one thing I realized I like doing that. First tick. The second was, are customers liking what I'm doing? And I realized while I'm doing what I'm doing and customers are also liking it, but I would like to do this differently. So the second step was I started creating my own designs. All my design creativity, everything combined together. I had to test that. And I came up with my first collection in March of 2020. I did a preview on 13th March and 26th March. Nobody knows what happened. So then we were in a lockdown. There was 2 years of COVID. We were sitting on a bum. Effectively, coming from a corporate, one thing you learn is not to give up. Things move. स्लो मूव करेगा, कभी फास्ट मूव करेगा, पर कभी कुछ रुकता नहीं है. तो हम भी अपने वेयर हाउस में बैठे और हमने बहुत सारे प्रोसेसेस पे काम किया. वी क्रैक द पैकेजिंग, वी क्रिएटेड अ वेबसाइट, वी सेट प्रोसेसेस, this, that, everything. 2 years we wiled off. I think we hardly sold much.
I have to interrupt you because 2 years whiling away. I mean, one of the things you also get used to in corporate is a paycheck which comes at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Right. And suddenly you're out of that. So how did you manage the finance part and what kind of emotions was that?
I worked for 20 years. And I'm a minimalist.
Okay.
How much less?
Okay. So it didn't bother you at all? You had your finances.
No. I was very well prepared for transition and I was back in Dehradun. It's my hometown. Okay, I knew that I have to be a single parent. I don't have a backup. I don't have anywhere from where money is coming in. I knew I have to create something. I knew eventually I'll do that. That confidence I had that generating money eventually is not going to be a problem. The bigger problem was sitting idle. So working on these processes happened, and I think one thing I always say, one thing COVID did to me. I mean, we were so small that we could have hardly failed. People fail if you have something. We were like so small that how much will you fail? There was nothing to fail on. So we were sitting, we had a very low rent place. It was a warehouse and I was working on processes. I kept working on the collections and collections and collections. Manufacturers were also not that busy. So kept creating small collections for us, got my relationship going with them. In 2021, in fact, in 2022, I realized that I need to really kick myself out of the slumber because I was exhausted. This entire COVID thing exhausted me. Not because I was working.
Exhausted because of being idle?
Because of being idle, because nothing moving. When you start a business, you want to see some move. Those are your motivators. Those are your pumps. Your petrol is your success. There was no fuel in the engine. It was only engine running. So in fact, when Rahul talked about the scale part, I was smiling because when we made some money, I didn't know whether it's good or bad. It was so small, I had no clue. I'm like, okay, you've made some 30, 40, 50,000 rupees and what do you do with this? Now, is it good or is it bad? The scale itself, adjusting to the scale part of it.
That happens in an entrepreneurial journey very often at the early stages. You don't know what to benchmark against because there's no benchmark.
On paper, you're making money, but this is like you've got 20, 30, 40,000 rupees in hand. Now, is this success or is this failure or what it is? So I was also going through all that. In 2022, when the COVID was weaning off, the third wave was weaning off and everything, I realized, I said, we better be doing something. We better move ahead. Otherwise, I won't be able to move from here. I'll get stuck. And that is when I realized that I want to create this concept store, which is a cafe cum studio. It's a place where you come spend time. You get some really amazing food. You get to spend time. You get some really amazing product. It was a dream. It's a dream executed. So I conceptualized it very, very quickly on a piece of paper. I kind of arranged for money. I looked into my bank accounts. I looked at my stocks. And I looked at my mutual funds and everything combined together. Everything came on an Excel. Talked to a few people, friends, family. kind of took a buy-in from them that if I need more money, I'll take it from you. So you keep this much aside, and I did take all of it from all of them eventually. So
Wow.
executed this project. I knew it. If I don't do it now, then I won't be able to do it. That's how this Yellow Marigold Experience Studio in a house cafe, which is a fair success in 2 years, happened. And what I'm glad about is because it's a dream executed. That's what people feel when they enter the space. One thing that I get a lot from people is how good the vibe is, how nice it feels to enter the space. I don't know how many of you could look into our the feedback from the customers, but if you look into it, read through some of them. Not, it's very nice. It's very organically feel nice place, and that's what we created. Yellow Marigold currently in its current avatar is a execution of a dream that I saw in bits and pieces.
What is incredible about that story for me is that, first of all, you took your time. And when you were talking about that 1 year gap that you took, it's so difficult to do. And everyone talks about the gap year in college. हमारे time में तो gap year वगैरह कुछ होता नहीं. You went from school to college, and then from college, either you went on to do your postgrad. If you didn't, then you bloody worked. So it's incredible that you did that for 1 year. And I don't know whether you realized or not, but when you were talking about that 1 year, there was a little bit of a twinkle in your eye and a smile that, you were manifesting. You were clearly talking about something that you really enjoyed in terms of listening to the audiobooks and the reading and the traveling and the doing nothing, which is brilliant. I mean, and I think I would recommend that to pretty much everybody. And then even when you started the business,
Moving.
yeah.
And also, I think the consciously moving from Delhi to Dehradun, where the pace of life itself is like very, very different. And in a corporate, you're constantly running from pillar to post. And so one is the slowing down of the fact that you're out of a corporate and you're not working, and the fact that you move to a different location. I think it requires a different mindset of just adjusting. And so, yeah, I mean, commendable that you could do that.
I think everybody's point of time realizes that they need to make a change. And trust me, people who make a change, it is not a show of strength or something. Nothing. It's only, I think, it's how fed up you are of your current stage and you need to move forward. In my case, that's exactly what it was. And I said, and the other question, again and again, the salary piece is coming in, the money part. I think I simplified my life much earlier in time. Even when I was working with Airtel, at some given point of time, as the transitions were happening, and as I said, I came from a middle class family, in fact, a lower middle class family, and we went through our own transition. Effectively, I was not raised to work, but eventually I ended up working, and I also was fairly successful. I was earning decent amount of money. I did my entire thing about going all out, spending all kind of money everywhere, traveling here, traveling there, and I got fed up also. And eventually, I came back to that point where I realized that my middle class upbringing was the best thing that has happened to me. The value system, the simplicity of it's clutter free. It's all about people, good conversation, maybe a cup of chai, some homemade goodies, and that's what you really, really enjoy. It's about the quality of conversations with the people you get along or you vibe well with. So
I love
broadly, if I have to put it into this thing, this is what I enjoy.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this has come up in multiple conversations for us, Ella, that I have a lot of friends who are obviously in the corporate world and making a lot of money. And there have been 3 or 4 conversations where people have told me that, Atul, I'm not sure I have enough money to be able to do this. And I'm sitting there thinking, you have more money than you're going to be able to spend in your life and your kids' lives. What are you waiting for? It's never going to be enough, right? For that mindset, it's never going to be enough.
And life.
It's a question of the perspective rather than the actual numbers or the reality is what it appears to me to be. And you decided to use that to your advantage and do what you had to do and made your kind of legs do the talking rather than simply mouthing it.
And I think when somebody makes a transition, in my mind, it's a function of pull and push. Sometimes there's a very big push factor. Hey, I'm not enjoying it. I'm not learning anything. I'm fed up of this. And then there may not be much pull. Like the way you put it, okay, you said, I've had enough. And then over time, you took your time to explore and find out and test as to what is it that you like to do. And that becomes your passion. So it's not like chasing a passion. It's like even finding a passion. When I contrast that with what Rahul is saying, he always had that passion, and there was no push, right? But there was a massive pull. He got an offer which he just couldn't let go of, right? So it's always a combination of push and. But a lot of people are going through this push and pull. But I think what stops them are these things like what Atul said. Hey, I may not have enough money. Can I really do this, right? Yeah.
Or it's very often that thing of log kya kahenge. That is a big factor as well. A lot of log kya kahenge. He's dropped this amazing job that he's got, and now he's running a bookstore, for example, or he's decided to just start a 2-people organization. He used to have 200 people reporting to him. Yeah, now he's just got 3 people. That kind of thing. People do worry about the fact that log kya kahenge, which is obviously, it's okay. Each to his own.
He said it very nicely in one of the guests saying, when I'm at a party, when people ask me, what do you do? Earlier, I would say I was so-and-so of so-and-so company. And now, I have to explain as to what I do.
I think yes, we worry too much about things. We have to start worrying less. I think simplify the thought process. I don't think worrying that much helps anybody.
Suman, you were just talking about Rahul probably not having a push. But I think, and I'm speaking on your behalf, Rahul, at this point, because you and I have had this conversation, and I've run Candid now for 25 years plus. So there is a push. There is a certain tiredness that sets in from being an entrepreneur doing the same business. Suman, you and I have spoken about this, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this podcast, because I've been and I still am thinking, what do I do as a second innings? The podcast is great. I love it. Great stories. But there is a push factor for an entrepreneur as well. There is that tiredness. There is that feeling of, I could do more. I could do different. And like I was saying a little while back, that as an entrepreneur or as a business person, the actual freedom is probably less rather than more.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I think also what happens is you get to a point where you wonder, how do I take this to the next level? What do I do more? I definitely started feeling boxed in. So even though, like I said, we'd been brought up to never feel boxed in, but I was maybe by my own ability, maybe by my own perception and an ability to see beyond what was in front of me. And that's why this opportunity actually opened up a new horizon, right? And that's what was exciting. It was going into a space that I was familiar with, but into an environment that was presenting me with an entire new set of opportunities.
And that's absolutely incredible, Rahul, from what you're doing in terms of the sheer environment and the ability to kind of adapt to that is something that I think you're doing really, really well at, because it's not easy. It's not easy changing mindsets at the age that we are. When you're older, it's difficult to adapt to new scenarios. And of course, there's the ecosystem. You've got adult children, you've got family, and all of that makes you a little, or maybe makes it a little easy for you as well, because your children are kind of on their way.
I'm glad you brought that up, because if there's one thing that I've come to a conclusion after all these years is being grateful. And it's being grateful for what you have, and it's for being grateful for the people you have. And that's at every level. It's with the people you work with. It's the guy who brings you chai, to the guy who's the carpenter, the supplier, and so on. And then, of course, most closely, as I said to you, is my wife. For her, I actually think this has probably been a more difficult transition for her than it has been for me, because I went from an existing business into what I wanted to do. What I left her with was an existing business of which she was a part, but was not overseeing the whole business, to suddenly saying, go ahead, this is now yours to run. And oh, by the way, I'm taking the next flight off. And so it was like, what are you saying? I mean, this is not what I've done for the last 27 years. And you're suddenly thrusting me to take on a whole new set of roles. So as much as it's the second innings for me, it's that much for her as well.
Yeah.
But the fact is, she embraced that without complaining, which allowed me to pursue this further. If she had said no, or if she had pushed back, we'd have been in a very different place right now.
Yeah, yeah. Which is where, we were talking to Suman and I were talking to somebody a little while back, and he very interestingly said, and the word stuck with me, that your first 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years of your career, which is maybe let's say the first innings, is something that the maximum support or help or push up you need from is your parents, right? Because they put you there, etc., set you off on that little journey. Whereas your second innings, the biggest support you need is actually from your spouse and your children. I mean, of course, in many cases, parents are still there, etc., but the spouse and children play a very big role. Of course, depending on how old your children, etc., spouse is, of course, the most important pivot point. But I thought I never thought of it like that. I always thought that family is important, etc. But this interesting compartmentalization was a very interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. I'm just curious that you use the word gratitude. I mean, there's a lot of talk about that. And I think it can be a game changer because it completely changes the way you think and the way you frame things in your head. Was that always there, or how did that even develop, that realization that it is gratitude, which is, because it's not intuitive, it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people?
I don't know if there was a particular incident. We've had an interesting at various times, interesting situations which we've been presented with, accidents, someone getting hurt, my children getting very badly hurt, and so on. And you kind of look back at these and you look and say, my God, everything's fine. And I have so much to be grateful for.
So, that you're absolutely right. It comes down to that, but it's inevitable. And I'm sorry, I'm going to throw in a bit of unsavory reality into this, that we all tend to look at the world through the world's eyes from time to time. And you need constant reminder, consciously realizing that you should not do that. That you are who you are, and it's your journey and it's your personal journey, and as long as you're better today than you were yesterday, that's great.
Unashamedly and unapologetically own who you are. And if you don't, that's when the lack of confidence steps in.
That's well said, Rahul. Yeah. Well said. Hard to do, but very well said.
So if you had to, do the whole journey again, what would you do differently? Yeah, when you think back, and what would you do the same? Something that really worked for you. Yeah. So maybe I'll start with you, Ella.
Yeah, I actually, when I look back, the last 2 years, I don't think I'll do it again. I would have done it at all. I would just cancel. It was so difficult. Financially, physically, execution wise. Honestly, today I talk about a dream, but honestly, last 2 years were a nightmare. Setting up a place in a small town, an ambitious project which does not have any trending lines or any material to read upon. There's no 5 tips to make it a success, right? You're executing something that you believe in, and there are people questioning you all the time. Not that I really care about that. Thankfully, that resilience really helps me. But the other thing which I have to say is that if I have to do this whole thing again, there is no other way of doing it but the way I've done it.
So now I'm confused. So is it like you would do the same thing? This is how it sounds to me. It's like I was in base camp, but I now climbed the summit, and it's awesome. The view is awesome, but I wouldn't have climbed it. Right? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That once you climb,
Yeah.
saw the view, you see the view, and you like it, right? But if somebody now with this experience and the hardship ask you whether you would want to do it again, you would snow for it. You would not repeat it. However, as I'm saying it, without this hardship, there's no other way of doing it. You to see
So
that
let
you
me
will
try and peel off a couple of onion layers on this and ask you, looking back, did you enjoy the journey, or was it just a question of getting to the destination? What would you say?
absolutely loved it, but it does not mean it did not come with its own set of hardship.
Sure, that is understandable. Yeah.
Stress of executing and putting all your personal finances into it, having a backup or plan B. Uh, but conviction. I had convictions. I knew there's no way this cannot work.
So, but isn't hard work like par for the course? Sorry, Rahul, I'm using a golf analogy. Yeah. Isn't it par for the course to that hard work?
I'm
That's what gets you there.
questioning
Yeah.
or
And you
complaining.
can't always get a hole in one, right?
You're not.
Oh my God, are we going to play this game now?
Sorry.
Nobody complains really about the hardship ever. If you've decided this path, you are in for it, right? But it's just a question of reaching that tipping point or falling before that tipping point. So that's the journey that you cover, and that's what I'm talking about right now. So
And what about differently? What were the things you would do differently if you had to do it again?
I don't think there is a way of doing this.
Yeah.
It's not a business which is what I have been able to create is not something that you see very often. It's a unique concept. Totally building something from scratch. You're not a known name. You're building a brand. It takes a lot.
See, when you look back, there are a lot of things one can do differently. The pace at that which you go, where you start. Do I do one store? Do I do multiple stores? Which area should I get into? Should I get a partner? Should I get funding? Should I spend more money off my own pocket? There are hundreds of decisions that one has taken to being where you are. When you look back, is there anything that you would have done differently in those areas?
When I started my business, I think if I have to do this again, I would focus more on the online bit than the retail part. That's one piece which I took my own sweet time to figure out.
Okay.
Not that I was not aware of the online piece and everything, but the scales were so different from my experience that I could not balance those scales. When you're talking about performance marketing, for me, spending less money was not even
Okay.
a thing, right? Starting with some money was not even a thing. In my head, it was like, unless you can spend this much, it's not going to be effective. Now, coming to terms with those scales has been the biggest learning or the personal growth in last 5 years of starting this. This is what I feel I could have done differently, provided I could understand it better back then.
Yeah. And I think it's a lot to do with unlearning, right? Which is one thing everybody talks about. Sometimes it's learning and sometimes it's unlearning.
One thing I
Super.
was just thinking,
Rahul.
sorry, Suman, one thing I was just thinking about, Ella, completely unrelated. I must say, you mentioned a couple of times about your upbringing and, how you were, I forget your exact
Yep.
words, but you were not really raised to work as a girl child. I think one thing you would have definitely done in the last few years is become a really good role model for your daughter. And I think that is no mean feat. I think that must be really amazing. You didn't really talk about your daughter much, but I think she has seen you doing something firsthand, which must be a great
I
role
am what
model
I am,
position
and
for
she
her.
sees me all the time, right? I think, but I don't bring that topic in specifically, Atul, because you would not expect the same. I mean, I consider myself more as a parent rather than saying a mother to a single mother. I am a complete parent.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's no question. That's not what I was referring to. I was simply talking about the fact that she's seeing a role model of what a woman can do in life in a professional sphere, and that's great for her to be able to see.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree. I agree. Ella, you have no idea subconsciously how much of an impact you must be having on your daughter right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
No, that I
I'm
know,
sure
for
she's
sure. I
looking
mean,
at
she
you and
tells
being
me.
like, "That's my mom."
She tells me that.
exactly.
She's 8.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
How old is she now, Ella?
Yeah.
Oh, she's
Quite.
got a lot to say for herself, I'm sure by now. Yeah.
Which also means you did all of that, including the relocation, single parent, and started
Wow.
business when she was 2 years old. I think that's
Yeah.
really something.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. Rahul, what would you do differently, and what would you do the same?
I don't think I do too much differently. I've been defined by a couple of things in my life, and I've tried very hard to stick to them. And they've shaped a lot of my decision making, and they've shaped a lot of what has happened for me. I talked briefly about it earlier, but the first one is the perfect effort. You only control what you put in. If you start worrying about the outcome, then you're worrying about things that you don't control. What you do is how much work you put in, how much knowledge you gather, how much you motivate others. That's what I call the perfect effort, is everyone doing their best to get to one place. And then, then there's so many other factors that sometimes determine the outcome. But no one should ever be able to fault you for not putting in 150% every single day of your life. That's one. And the other is, we don't necessarily give credit to how much human interaction matters. And therefore, the importance of dealing with people right is super important. Again, one of the things I've been brought up with is that you will always meet a person at least twice in your life. I've seen that come out, and to my benefit, in my golf story, in my transition. And it has very much been shaped by how I've dealt with people for the last 30 years. I think if you do right by others, they will always do right by you. There's you cannot be constantly worrying about insecurities and things that you don't control.
But
I
isn't
wouldn't
that
change a
hard?
thing. I would
Isn't
just
that
stick
very
to those.
hard? I mean, not worrying about the outcome, because
It
most
is.
people are worrying about the future and regretting about the past. That's what this whole thing about not being in the present, right, comes from.
But can you
No, it's
control it?
interesting you say that, but I'm saying I find it can be very hard, isn't it?
You can't. If you can't control it, I think what you
Exactly.
do
That's
is
what I'm
the
saying.
right thing at
You
any
can't
given point
control
of
it.
time
You
with a
can't.
You can only
maybe
worry about
medium-term view. That's about it, and you can be still wrong, and you can hardly control it.
Yeah, I agree with Ella. I mean, I don't think you can worry about failing, because if you worry about failing, then that's your benchmark.
That's where I think the gratitude part
You
comes
have
from
to
for an
assume that you
entrepreneur.
will be
Like, I
successful.
am immensely grateful all the time. This is where for
You took the
you'll
words
see
out of my
this.
mouth,
The
actually, Ella. Yeah.
entrepreneurs
Go
are
ahead, please.
usually, uh, they don't worry that much. I'm not talking that you don't worry about business. I'm saying in general in life, you believe. And you believe if it is supposed to happen, it will happen. And you're full of gratitude. I'm very, very grateful for everything. And I think I'm not saying it for the sake of saying it, and you can see it on my face. I believe in it.
So I'm taking away two things. One is resilience, of course, to get back from setbacks. But other is optimism. I think what we're saying is there has to be some optimism, that hope that things will eventually work out well.
And also, Suman, there has to be passion.
Yeah.
Ultimately, whether it's as an entrepreneur, whether it's in your corporate environment, whether it's in anything you do, it has to be driven by wanting to be the best at it. It has to come from a place of passion. Otherwise, it doesn't have. Otherwise, it doesn't have a role in your life, and it shouldn't
Yeah.
have a role in your life. If you're not doing it because you want to do it, you shouldn't be doing it at all.
But the other thing which I feel is very important is that fire in the belly. So Rahul, you said you had a very privileged background. Sometimes, you wonder that why do I need to do this, right? I mean,
No, let me
so
rephrase.
how do you get that fire in the belly constantly?
The privilege did not come from the point of view of that once we finish your education, you have everything on a silver platter. That's not correct at all. The privilege came from exposure. It came from a really good education. It came from a place where we were allowed to explore. Let me be very clear. It did not mean that if I had chosen to sit at home and do nothing, then someone would have paid my bill. Not at all. I would have got a tight slap across my face and being told to go out.
Privilege came from having a lot of options. Doesn't mean doing nothing was an option.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yes, that's very well put. Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of my key takeaways, Rahul, was what you were saying. I think you said your mom told you about the fairy with the one hair. That's a vision that I'm not going to be able to take out of my head for a little while, because I think it is so cool, because it's like, it's similar to, being lucky is being ready, being prepared when an opportunity presents itself. Doesn't mean that, you have to be prepared and ready and then the opportunity presents itself and you grab it. And I think that was a very cool way of putting it.
Atul, at the risk of clichéing again, the harder you work, the luckier you get. It's as simple as that. So you set yourself up to get lucky.
Yeah.
Luck doesn't land on your plate.
And Rahul, what would you do the same?
I just continue to follow my passion. I've been able to do that at work, in the different things I've done, and it's taken me to places that I didn't know. It's taken me to all good places. It's taken me into some dark places that I've navigated, and that's all been part of this very fun 30-year-long journey.
Yeah, with so much experience, what is the advice that you would give to somebody watching this episode, and probably as a fence sitter wants to do something?
It could be either way. Just because your journey was one way, I mean, you may have words of advice for the other way as well. So feel free, go for it.
Yeah.
Dream big.
Dream big.
Simple. It's dream big. If you, who was it? Browning, Keats? If man could reach out and touch the stars, what would there be a heaven for? You have to always reach beyond what you think is your reach. And that is how you will grow. That is where you will find opportunity. Otherwise, we will stay boxed in.
The only thing I would say is, if you really want to do it, do it. There's no other way of getting where you want to be other than doing it. Nike वालों ने सही बोला था, but do it.
Nike हो गया.
There's no other way of getting it. You have to do it.
All right. Great place to finish. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate your time, your more importantly, your vulnerability, your willingness to share your personal stories, your personal lives, your personal emotions. I've learned a lot from both of you. Rahul, inspirational in terms of your life tenets to live by, and Ella, your fortitude, your ability to do what you believed in, and going the extra mile. Really appreciate, and I just find both of you extremely inspirational. Thank you so much for your time, both of you.
Thank you.
And Rahul, you know Atul for a long time. I am just meeting you for the first time. By going by your mantra, we'll meet again at some point.
Absolutely.
Yes, a second time, at least once more.
A second time.